probably get more good would come from that than it would from a fight over your motives, I guess. But during this time, we're going to get into here, you'd think Paul and the other missionaries at that time, motives wouldn't be in question. But this is Paul and them during this time also. We know the persecution that they were facing. It was a lot different in our times. When you may get persecuted about your faith in some way or fashion, but during their time it was a lot different. It was to death, and it was even persecution by the Jewish people in the sense that they didn't believe that you should be sharing this information with the Gentiles, or even that anything should be given to the Gentiles at all. That a lot of the Jewish people thought that this was all what was the word that they used? Blasphemous, every bit of it, because they were still looking for the Messiah, and they thought all this stuff that was going on at this time was terrible. And they were making all kind of inroads into the church in different regions. We know the ones they talk about in the Bible. I think it was Corinthians. I might be wrong. They were trying to mix in some of the law and things like that with the gospel, and had been successful in some churches. Had mixed in part of the law of and all the different traditions that they had carried on. Tried to mix some of that in with the gospel, and they were reprimanded for that, saying that's not the case. You don't do all those things anymore. So they were very much persecution during this time, and also apparently there was a lot of false teachers during this time, and that's kind of where Paul gets here, and it says Paul recalls his visit here in the name of this chapter. He says he's reminding them of his visit here in this chapter of what happened when he got there. He's all the things that took place, how it all everything went the whole time he was there, and just so it's clear to everyone and everyone remembers is kind of what it looks to me, feels like he's doing this for. But we'll start here in chapter 2, and I'm going to read verse 1 and 2. It says, "For yourselves, brethren, know our entrance in unto you, that it was not in vain. But even after that we had suffered before and was shamefully entreated, as you know, at Philippi, we were bold in our God to speak unto you the gospel of God in much contention." So it says in reviewing his ministry in Thessalonica, Paul listed his actions and attitude. He reveals that God's love was at heart of his ministry, and he lists all the different forms and main points of his study, and provides us with guidance for our own service. And he said they had been living, talking about living their lives had been turned upside down. I think I feel like, this part's a little bit early, but he was talking about they had been living their lives had been turned upside down. Everything in the people that Paul had spoken to and things had been turned upside down. And it says here in the teacher's lesson, it says they were finally living right side up, thanks to the gospel. I said that the believers knew about the missionaries and the persecution in Philippi. So when Paul and them had gotten there, not only were they coming humbly and not asking for anything of the people, trying to be just coming to share the gospel and not trying to ask anything of the people. They also came in there beat up pretty bad. they came from Philippi, still had the scars on them when they came from Philippi, from being beat up there for being persecuted for sharing the gospel. They come to Thessalonica still with the scars of that, and apparently they were visible, so it had been pretty bad. That's what he's talking about here in verse 2. It said, but even after that we had suffered before and shamefully entreated, as you know, at Philippi. They were still here, bold in God to speak unto you the gospel with much contention. Didn't faze them. They had come there. If they were doing it for their own glory, probably wouldn't have come in beat up and scuffed up. They'd have waited until they were a little bit shinier, to come in and to share the gospel. You're gonna right now. If somebody come up to you and they were beat up and scuffed up and said, "Hey, come down here and help me," you're like, "I don't know if I want to or not." Regardless of what the situation is, you come up to me all scuffed up, I probably don't want to go, or I'm gonna ask a lot of questions before I do. Yeah. So this is kind of the way Paul and them showed up is like this, and they didn't come. Their motives is what we're fixing to get into now. Let's go in. It's going to be quite a bit, but we'll go 3 through 6 and break it down some here. It says, verse 3 says, "For our exhortation was not of deceit, nor of uncleanliness, nor in guile. But as we were allowed of God to be put in trust with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God, which trieth our hearts. For neither at any time use we flattering words, as you know, nor a cloak of covetousness, God is witness. Nor of men sought we glory, neither of you, nor yet of others, when we might have been burdensome as the apostles of Christ." So we'll get into that last part. I know you all, that kind of throws up something there. There at the end of verse 6, it says, but being, it says here, being focused on sharing the gospel isn't enough. We need to do so with godly motives. And that's what Paul's talking about here at the beginning of this. Verse 3 says it was not with deceit or anything. In verse 4, and it was with godly motives. They didn't come from a desire to deceive or of selfish gain. They delivered the true message of the gospel, not adding to it or taking away from it, seeking to please God. And God had trusted them, and God would test their motives. So they were not looking for any kind of anything special. And it goes on down there to say, it says it wasn't a get rich scheme. Okay, so you go back to verse 6 there, and it talks about, right there at the end of it, says, when we might have been burdensome as the apostles of Christ. Do you know what that might have meant? At this time, the apostles of Christ sounds like they were known. The 12 apostles, I guess, it sounds like they were known throughout the country, I guess. And with them coming, it may have brought a little bit of fanfare with it, of people following them, of all the places that they had been. Apparently they'd been heard of. And Paul didn't come in there saying, "Hey, I'm one of the apostles. Y'all need to fix a nice dinner for me, throw up a nice tent, and I'll have a service," and all this stuff. Kind of the things we'd do now. If one of the famous preachers was going to be in town or something, we'd probably put him up in the best place and the best everything and things like that. Now they have the I hate saying Billy Graham, but any of the conferences, the things they used to have, which they paid for all of it themselves, but it was a lot to do about them coming to town. So I think that may have been what Paul was saying here. There wasn't a lot of fanfare. There wasn't people coming in and saying, "Hey, this is the apostles. Y'all need to be different with these guys. You need to treat them extra well. You need to do anything like that." There wasn't none of that took place. He didn't come in saying he was anything other than coming to share the gospel. We think that happens quite a bit nowadays. I believe that they make a lot of claims and a lot of things about certain people, you know, that is in religion, and whatever religion you want to talk about around the world. There's people that are high up in it, and they get a lot of fanfare. What do we know about the Jewish religion during this time and during Jesus' time? Did the priests and the high priests and all that get a lot of fanfare wherever they went? Sure, they did. If they went into a different part of town or went into town or anything like that, they probably was noticed and talked about a lot. Hey, this is one of the priests or scribes or whatever they was at the time. They probably was a lot of fanfare over that. So, has anyone got anything to add? But it says, as an apostle, Paul had the authority to demand recognition or special treatment from the Thessalonians, and he could have. It's going on here in the lesson a little bit, talking about some of the stuff. He could have asked to be stayed at a nice place and been fed and all those things, but he didn't seek any glory or any praise from anyone for his scars. I don't think he went in. They didn't go in with their scars, other than what they could see. I don't think they went in and just flashed them, saying this is this. I think they went in as humbly as they could, and they wasn't trying to sway anyone by anything that was in them. It was all through the gospel that they were trying to preach. It wasn't for anything of their own. That was such a common thing during that time, and I think that's what this whole chapter here circles around. Is Paul and them is not trying to get any glory for themselves, and that's kind of where the whole chapter goes. Is they're not looking for glory themselves. They're not trying to be like every other ism or religion or whatever you want to call it that was out at that time. They wasn't trying to be like any of those. And we'll go now to verse 7 and 8. It says, "But we were gentle among you, even as a nurse cherisheth her children. So being affectionately desirous unto you, we were willing to have imparted unto you not the gospel of God only, but also our own souls, because you were dear to us." And it says here in the lesson, it says that the missionaries were at ease with the Thessalonians quickly, even before they had trusted in Christ, becoming friends and everything like that. So they were generally a good people, and apparently they had come to them in the right way, talking in the right way, because they hadn't scared them all off. If they had come in just screaming, "You've got to go to church, you got to do this," just coming in saying whatever, trying to scare them, they probably would have scared them all off. They came in gentle, nice, being, as it says there in verse 7, came in gentle, even as a nurse cherishes her children. They come in very, just like that. Come in gentle, didn't try to force anything, tried to be as respectful and thing to the people as they could, made friends with them, took part in different things that they had done, and everybody liked them, and they liked all them as well. And it says, the only note I have on that right there is they had come. Apparently, they had the opposite there at some time, and it said they in fact had risked their lives sharing the gospel with them. So it was the Thessalonians knew as well what they had done, that they were risking their lives being there, sharing the gospel. They seen what had happened to them in Philippi. They wasn't there for the money. They wasn't there for the fame. They were there for them only, and they had risked their lives just being there. And the Thessalonian people realized that. Anyone have anything? We're going now in verse 9 and 10. It says, "For you remember, brethren, our labor and travail, for laboring night and day, because we would not be chargeable unto any of you. We preach unto you the gospel of God. Ye are witnesses, and God also, how holily and justly and unblameably we behaved ourselves among you." So they come in there in verse 9, labor and travail, laboring night and day, because we would not be chargeable to any of you. What does that mean? I think it means we came in and earned our own money. We took care of ourselves. We fed ourselves. We made our own money. We didn't ask nobody for nothing. And that way you couldn't say that, hey, we just come here for the money. And that's just come here to get y'all to take care of us and give us some money. And we went on our way. That was not the case. There was no nothing like that, and it was made very clear. And I think too that may be why it says that the Thessalonians was they were friends with them before they got saved. They respected them because they didn't come in asking for money, asking for a handout, yelling at them, telling them they had to do something. They come in respectfully and shared the gospel with them out of love and not out of any kind of thing to build themselves up or anything like that. And and that's what it says there. It said we were. He called on God and the Thessalonian believers to testify to the sincerity and consistency of his missionary team during the early days of their missionary in Thessalonica. And although they were not perfect, no one found fault with them. Their behavior of Paul's team supported their message in every way. So no one found fault with them. They done everything that they could do to not be a burden, to not have any kind of fault found with them about any reason they got there. Our missionaries today, if you were a missionary, what would be your number one thing in mind when you came into a place? If you were a missionary and they had never heard the gospel, how would you think? What would be the first thing you would think when you come into a town and they had never heard the gospel and you were wanting to share the gospel with them? How scary would that be, and what would be your mindset? I mean, would you want the easy way out? They could have took the easy way out and said, "Hey, we're apostles, we're from," and they could have walked around with their chest stuck out or something. But they was going for to truly share the gospel, and wasn't trying to find the easy way out. Wasn't trying to do anything. And what would be it would be tough, but you would have to keep. To me, it would be tougher, and it would be easier at the same time to not depend on someone to give you money. Frees you up a lot, and you can say whatever you want to say because you're not depending on somebody to give you money. If you still want to be respectful and everything like that, and to be able to work and to take care of yourself. So all those things, any way that you can come and not put, they were looking anything they could do to not put a burden on the people is what they were after. And to me, I don't know if this, you can tell me that, but this seems like something got back to Paul, or something. This whole chapter is like something got back to Paul that they were saying, "Hey, Paul and them went over there to get some money," or something like that. Whatever their thing is. It to me it feels like, or it may have not been there, but it may have been somewhere else. And Paul was trying to clear the air up, saying they're saying this over in Philippi or whatever that we came there asking for money and they beat us up and run us out of town. And I'm telling y'all, that's not what happened, and you see how we are when we got here. We're not like that. So that may have been the message going on in Philippi, is they went there and they were trying to get money and whatever, and they made up all these stories about them. Then they come to Thessalonica, and there's people from Philippi trying to say that they were doing all these things over there. So they changed the thought. They were there. Was it last week we talked about, how long was that? Was it they were there in Thessalonica? It said three something. It was 3 weeks, I think it was, or something like that. 3 Sabbaths. So that'd be at least 3 weeks. I think last week we talked about they were there for 3 Sabbaths. So 3 weeks, you get a lot of people, if they were traveling with you or had come from a place or whatever, 3 weeks, you're going to get a lot of crossover in a town as big as Thessalonica anyway. So people that were traveling the trade routes and things like that probably did come through and knew of Paul or things that happened to him in Philippi during all this time too. So, does anyone else have anything? We'll go down to verse 11 and 12, and it says, as you know, we were exhorted and comforted and charged, every one of you, as a father does his children, that you would walk worthy of God, who hath called you unto his kingdom and glory. So we come in, I like the way it says in verse 11, at the end of it, says, as a father does his children, and how they had comforted them and taught them. The difference in a instructor or a ruler or whatever boss, whatever position you want to put up there, and a father is pretty large. And that's what he was wanting to say, is they come as a father figure, teaching something out of love and not out of force like you would get from a boss or from a ruler or anything like that. From a forceful side, they were teaching out of love. And it says that all the new believers need to be encouraged to walk worthy of God. And it says Paul's team wanted the Thessalonians to live in ways consistent with the gospel. Their lives needed to reflect a new relationship with God. So that new relationship with God and how they are changed. How they had... what was it we talked about in last week's lesson? Where was it we was turned them upside down? Where was that we got to that? Or is that something I haven't covered yet? But they were being, the people had been changed. The Thessalonians had been changed. They had changed their lives, had turned their lives around, and it was going to be very noticeable in their area to be that different than everyone around there. Serving all the different gods, worshiping all the different gods that there was around at that time, all the different religions that they had, and how different their lives would look compared to them. And the things that Paul was teaching them. See if I'm too far ahead of myself. I'll go ahead and read all the way through 16. It says, let me read 15 and 16, and I'll go through all that. It says, who both killed the Lord Jesus and their own prophets, and have persecuted us, and they please not God, and are contrary to all men, forbidding us to speak to the Gentiles, that they might be saved, to fill up their sins always, for the wrath has come upon them to suffer most. And so they had to. He was teaching them how to live the Christian life and everything that he was doing. So when they had come to town from the very beginning, before they were, as it says, they accepted them before they accepted Christ. They accepted Paul and other believers. And why would they accept them? Because they come in a loving way. They didn't come in boasting or doing anything like anybody else. They didn't come in saying any kind of, anything great. They come in, they worked, they associated with the people, they loved the people, they taught them before they accepted Christ, they were teaching them how to be a Christian by sharing love with them, teaching them, helping them, and things like that. The different things we know about, what's all the things we're taught about helping others as being a Christian. You helping the widows, the orphans, all the different things that you can do. They come into town doing those things, helping people where they needed help and not asking for anything in return, and sharing the gospel with them. That's how a lot of these great missionaries, you hear all the ones talk that comes to church and stuff, and the missionaries talk about the work they do. They don't just go to this town and start preaching and whatever happens, happens. We're just going to stand here and build a tent and preach. They go in, they build schools, they get to be part of the community. We've heard every one of them that comes in talk about the communities that they're in and the areas they're around. They go in and they get into that community. They get into the groups of people around there and try to help them in everything they can do. That's how you're supposed to be a missionary. And that apparently was a huge contrast during the Thessalonians' time here to what they had seen carried on through everything else. And then we get down to verse 15 and 16. There is no doubt who it's talking about there in verse 15 and 16. It's not talking about the Gentiles or the foreign pagan religions or anything like that. That's 100% talking about the Jewish people and their persecution of the church, and how they wasn't happy with the Christians or the whole Christian movement. The Jewish people were not happy one bit with it. And that's what it's talking about there in verse 15 and 16. It said they killed the Lord Jesus and their own prophets, and have persecuted us, and they please not God, and are contrary to all men. Sounds pretty rough. Verse 16, forbidding us to speak to the Gentiles, that they might be saved, to fill up their sins always, for the wrath is come upon them to the uttermost. We want to don't preach anything to the Gentiles. We're the only ones meant to be saved. We can do anything we want. We're the Jewish people. Is basically what they were telling them. Is that not about it? That's about what they're saying. Don't say anything to nobody else. We're the only ones to be saved. And they were kind of bold about it. What's the word? Proud, boastful, whatever you want to say. That was their attitude about it. And didn't think that the Gentiles or anyone else should hear the gospel, should even know about God, was where their stance was. Anyone want to share anything? So looks like next week's lesson is going to be the end of this chapter and the first, let's say the first 5 verses of chapter 3 next week. Oh, I'm not going to be here next week. Just remember, we're going to the mountains Friday, so I won't be here next week. You want this teacher book? Anybody want it? We don't have anything, we'll be dismissed. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this day. Thank you for your love and mercy and your grace, Lord. Thank you for those in attendance, and ask you to please be with whoever can't be here today, Lord. And Lord, may everything we do bring